During Black History Month, we pause, reflect, and honor the sacrifices made for us in the past, and pledge our dedication to continuing the fight for the future. Throughout history, many have shed tears, persevered through pain, and lost their lives in the pursuit of justice and equal rights. Working together, average individuals developed into leaders to take on the issues of poverty, voting rights, and ending segregation. What kind of leadership did it take to champion these issues? We're all familiar with many of the famous faces like Dr. King and Malcolm X. But who were the everyday people who stepped forward to lead? Here we find an interesting woman, Diane Nash, who started out as an ordinary student and grew into a key leader and strategist during the Civil Rights Movement.
I'm on my way, and I won't turn back.
Diane Nash was a leader of the Nashville student movement. She was also somebody deeply, deeply rooted in nonviolence, in the practice and theory and the philosophy. This was not just a tactic that she used when she was on the picket line. It was something she deeply, deeply believed in.
She went downtown one day and found out that things were a little bit different here in Nashville.
That was so demeaning and so humiliating.
She was very angry. She was disturbed by this form of racism that she met in Nashville, which she had not seen in Chicago. She was anxious to get involved in doing something about it.
The thing we need to keep in mind, and that is we don't want to be arrested today. We're going to try to avoid it. However, we can't go down there fearing to be arrested.
Diane was relatively better known than most of the other people in these local student movements because of the successful confrontation she'd had with the mayor of Nashville in forcing him to admit that he believed in lunch county integration. He thought it was right. It was Diane Nash who made him do this.
I asked the mayor, first of all, Mayor West, do you feel that it's wrong to discriminate against a person solely on the basis of his race or color?
I could not agree that it was morally right for someone to sell them merchandise and refuse them service.
I think we were very pleased and very happy with our mayor at that moment.
We shall not be moved.
We had to make certain that the Freedom Ride continued, especially since there had been a great deal of violence. Everyone understood that to take up the Freedom Ride meant that there was a good possibility of people being seriously injured or even killed. And in my capacity as coordinator, several of the people getting on the bus gave me sealed envelopes that I was to mail in the event of their deaths. The attitude became, well, kill us if that's what you're going to do. But we were going to be rid of segregation.
Leadership has always been central in the fight for justice. No one understood this better than A. Philip Randolph, a pioneer in the labor movement.
I think one of the individuals that in some ways encapsulates as much of the full range of political organizing in Harlem over many decades of the 20th century would be A. Philip Randolph. Here's a man who comes into the fullness of his calling first as a socialist. He is the co-editor of a magazine called The Messenger, advocating for taking down capitalism as really the only true road to racial equality, which eventually leads him to union organizing. And so he founds the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters and Maids. The and maids gets dropped off over time, but initially it really was a mass labor movement organized around increasing wages and benefits for black porters and maids on Pullman cars, which traveled all around the country. A. Philip Randolph also is the broker of the March on Washington movement, which is a threat posed to Franklin Delano Roosevelt to integrate the defense industries that were taking advantage of black migrants coming out of the South in response to the opportunities of World War II. And so with the threat of 100,000 black people marching on Washington in 1941, Franklin Delano Roosevelt preemptively signs Executive Order 8802, the Fair Employment Practices Commission. Randolph eventually supports Martin Luther King, the young Baptist preacher in the mid-1950s, and ultimately leads to being the lead planner of the March on Washington in 1963. A. Philip Randolph even lived long enough to witness the influence of Malcolm X on this community. So if you just take A. Philip Randolph, that one life rooted here in this community, in all the different philosophies and ideological approaches that he took in trying to move the needle on civil rights in this country, you get a wonderful sense of the richness of ideas that were in circulation.
Through perseverance, determination, and leadership, we've overcome the darkness of slavery, pushed through the trials of the civil rights movement, and have built an America where we can genuinely tell our children that they too can become president someday. Shortly after being elected, President Obama shared this while sitting on the infamous Montgomery bus that Rosa Parks had traveled. I just sat in there for a moment and pondered the courage and tenacity that is part of our very recent history, but is also part of that long line of folks who sometimes are nameless, oftentimes didn't make the history books, but who constantly insisted on their dignity, their share of the American dream.
We must be a source of hope to the poor, the sick, the marginalized, the victims of prejudice, not out of mere charity, but because peace in our time requires the constant advance of those principles that our common creed describes: tolerance and opportunity, human dignity, and justice. We, the people, declare today that the most evident of truths, that all of us are created equal, is the star that guides us still, Just as it guided our forebears through Seneca Falls and Selma and Stonewall, just as it guided all those men and women, sung and unsung, who left footprints along this great mall, to hear a preacher say that we cannot walk alone, to hear a king proclaim that our individual freedom is inextricably bound to the freedom of every soul on earth. It is now our generation's task to carry on what those pioneers began. For our journey is not complete until our wives, our mothers, and daughters can earn a living equal to their efforts. Our journey is not complete until our gay brothers and sisters are treated like anyone else under the law. For if we are truly created equal, then surely the love we commit to one another must be equal as well. Our journey is not complete until no citizen is forced to wait for hours to exercise the right to vote. Our journey is not complete until we find a better way to welcome the striving, hopeful immigrants who still see America as a land of opportunity, until bright young students and engineers are enlisted in our workforce rather than expelled from our country. Our journey is not complete until all our children, from the streets of Detroit to the hills of Appalachia to the quiet lanes of Newtown, know that they are cared for and cherished and always safe from harm. That is our generation's task, to make these words, these rights, these values of life and liberty and the pursuit of happiness real for every American.
In our own ranks, we have seen SEIU-UHW leaders make the difference and grow to make monumental changes in the workplace, our union, and the nation. One of the clearest examples of this was our brother, Les Harris, who passed away in December of 2012. Les loved making a positive difference in the lives of others and worked tirelessly to do so. Les fought the good fight, and the best way we can honor his memory is to pick up the torch and continue his legacy. We've come a long way, but there is still more work to do. As leaders, we need to continue to stand up for people who also have a right to their dignity and their share of the American dream.